I'm Anyika Onuora, and I am on the podcast Because It's There. I hope you enjoy it today.
Because It's There with Saray Khumalo is proudly sponsored by Vuma.
In a world of possibilities, our choices define who we are. We can choose to simply get things done, but we choose to make a difference. We can choose to go far, or we can choose to go further. We choose great over good every time because we can. And because we can, we must. We don't just act, we activate. When we move forward. Instead of simply providing access, we see the potential for success. Because where others see data, we see dreams. To us, connecting means more than plugs and ports. We exist to empower ordinary people to do extraordinary things. We aim higher and we choose to do more. We don't wait for opportunities. We create them. Our choices define us, and when faced with the choice, we always choose extraordinary.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Because It's There. And today we have an amazing guest that's going to show us about leadership, African leadership. I've asked before, why bother being great? Why bother being a leader? Because in spite of all our insecurities, we are all leaders. Here's somebody that's represented not only Africa at continent level, but on a global stage. And this is Anyika Onuora. Welcome, Anyika.
And hi, thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for honoring us today. I want to start with a little icebreaker, something just to, give us a taste of who you are. The hidden greatness in Nigerian food that everybody brags about is that it makes you feel
happy. I would say happy. For someone who wasn't able to eat Nigerian food during my career because, sometimes it's a little bit starchy. And because I had a strict, super strict diet, I wasn't able to eat it. But, Nigerian food in the off season. So when my season is finished, when I finish competing, I always used to just come back home to my family home in Liverpool and before even asking for anything, my mom would make me my favorite pounded yam, akara, a goosey soup. Oh, honestly, it's comfort food, but it makes me extremely happy. So for me, it's exquisite happiness.
Amazing. I wonder if that's what created a little bit of speed when you were on the field. Having said
Probably.
that, I've got one more for you.
Uh-huh.
What makes you proudly African? One thing.
Ooh. Yeah, it's I would probably say it is rich in culture. So I love everything about being African. I love everything about being Nigerian. Growing up in the UK, everything is very much westernized. But, when you're back home either in your household where you grow up or when I go back to Nigeria, when I travel home to Nigeria, it's just such a vibe. It's just rich in the culture, the people, going back to my place of happiness, which is food. Everything about being Nigerian and being in Nigeria is just incredible. And, I'm thankful, to even be Nigerian of Nigerian descent, because I wouldn't want it any other way. What's not to love about being Nigerian or even African in itself? It's just amazing. So yeah, I would probably say that.
I love that. And listening to you talking, and I'm just thinking, you are Nigerian, yes, but you have called Liverpool your home for most of your life. You know, one would assume that your parents made sure that you knew your roots, even as a UK resident. In what way did they do this?
Yeah, my parents, they instilled a lot of this in my youth, you know, from growing up to probably, you know, as I got older. So I remember when, you know, we weren't allowed to settle for anything less. Everything had to be in education. It had to be A. You know, everything just had to be top notch. You had to be number one in everything. And even though sometimes it felt like the expectations were incredibly high, it also allowed you to set the bar high. That even when people would tell you it was completely unattainable, you can't do this, you can't do that, my parents would always remind me, you know, you can achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. And then even when it comes to, you know, kind of relating that to track and field and my sport, you know, my father said to me even before I, you know, in the early years of my career, he could see, oh, okay, she's running well. She's running well, oh, representing the country, you know, all of these things. Mm-hmm. And when I was a junior athlete, and then he realized I could take it to, you know, professional senior level, he would always say to make sure that education comes first. You have to get your degree, you know, and it can't be just a normal degree. You have to do the top one. That's always how it was. So, you know, I ended up studying economics at university, which I loved because it gave me the balance away from sport. So some athletes tend to just kind of do sports science or sports literature or whatever, and then, you know, also train in their various, you know, events. Whereas with me, I purposely wanted to do something business related. I loved anything to do with economics, macroeconomics, the economy, you know, politics, all of that. I kind of loved it. And yeah, and my father was an accountant, so really I had no choice. But ultimately I did enjoy it. I really, really did enjoy it.
Wow. So it's not just, you know, speed, but it's also brains. That sounds like an African household. You are from a sporting culture. It sounds like it's a common thread in the lives of Onuora children. One of your brothers, Ife, I believe, is a former footballer, whereas the other, Emmy, is an academic whose book, Pitch Black, focused on Black British footballers. Where does this sporting craze come from if your father was an accountant?
That's a very good question. To be honest, I just think, you know, we are in a family of high achievers, you know. My brother, Ethan, was someone who I always admired and looked up to from, you know, when I was young. You know, there's around 15, maybe 20-year age gap between us. But he's, you know, he was incredibly smart, incredibly fast and gifted and super talented as well. So watching him progress in football in the 90s was just amazing to me. And if I could even have a quarter of his success, I would be, you know, elated. But it became apparent that clearly I'm the quicker one between the two of us. No, I'm joking. No, but he, you know, it's incredible to have an amazing role model like that in the family. And then my brother Emmy, he also is a massive sports fan. And, you know, when it comes to writing and anything to do with books and literature, you know, he's an author. So yeah, bunch of talented superstars in the family. And yeah, my dad definitely has a lot to answer for.
Absolutely. What a blessing, and good role models. I think that is indeed a blessing. So a culture that is pervasive in Africa throughout, whether West Africa, Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, is that there is intention in naming children. You know, what does the name Anyika mean? And did your parents ever tell you why they gave you that specific name, Anyika?
Well, let me not get this wrong.
Everyone is listening. Your parents.
I know. I'm sorry. So I may or may not. I may or may get this wrong. If I apologize if I do, someone will probably message me and be like, "You got it wrong." But basically, like, Anyika is kind of like my English name. So it's actually Wanyika. So it's NWANYIKA. So the N is silent, and then it's Wanyika. And then Janetta is my middle name as well. And usually within Nigerian Igbo culture, they tend to name the children related to God. So, you know, faith and religion is big in the culture. So I believe, again, if someone knows it else, then it's fine. But from what I was told, it means God is with you.
Oh, wow.
So, and I feel that in every way, in every presence. You know, when I'm on the start line, I'm praying. When I'm in the call room before I go out on the track, I'm praying. Before I start a training session, I'm just praying to God that I'm healthy, I have a good run, I have a good session, you know, no injuries. And I think it's just something that was given to me from a young, you know, from birth. And I'm also named after my grandma, so my mum, my father's mother. She passed away a couple of years before I was born, but he wanted to carry on the name, and you know, it's a huge honor to even be given that name. So I didn't meet her, but I still feel like, you know, a huge connection within the Onuora lineage within the family. So it's huge.
Absolutely. As I was listening to you, my firstborn is called Azinkosi. It means no God. And I know that people sometimes think, it's just a name, but people leave their name. You know, it doesn't matter whether you find out that your name doesn't actually mean that by somebody that's pedantic. It matters what you believe it to mean and how you've lived your life in line with what you were told the name means. So that is beautiful. And thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
Yeah. So a British Nigerian, your parents once told you, you have to work twice as hard as your white counterparts. This is a loaded statement. I mean, I've heard it, you know, I've told my kids as well. What can you tell us about the social order in the United Kingdom? Did this come to reality, or was it just parents saying it, or did you actually follow it and worked twice as hard as anybody else around you?
Yeah, I think it stemmed from probably when my parents arrived in the UK. Yeah. You know, they always had to just kind of work, you know, it's all we've ever done as Africans. You know, I learned it not just from my parents, but from other elders within the community. I would see them in Liverpool and they would graft and work hard, not just for their families here, but they would literally have build and will try and build a family or empire here. And any money that they earn, they send back home. And that's something that still continues to this day, you know, because everyone thinks because you live in the West, it's like, oh, you got a better life, but you still have to work 10 times as hard. And then in relation to my parents and when it came from, I think it was more to do with the fact that they would see stuff in society and they would encounter different things, i.e. racism, which is, you know, the obvious one. And, you know, you weren't allowed, society would tell Black people that you were a nurse, so you were lower class. So you were either lower or working class. You were a cleaner, you were a lorry driver or lorry bin men or bin woman. It was always that. Not that there's anything wrong with those jobs, but you know, growing up, you kind of always, society at times kind of expected that from Black people. Whereas if you want to get a high paying job, my father and my mum would always tell us, like, you have to, like, doctor, accountant, you know, surgeon, dentist, you know, all of these, engineering, you have to go for like a high paying job. And I think it is because society tells you that, you know, you as Black people, you've come over here and, you know, there's that stigma. You've come over here and you've taken all our jobs, but, you know, that's not the case. Like, we come into society to also work because we're just as deserving to receive the same jobs that, you know, white people also have. And then I encountered that myself as I got older. So I think the first time I really, really encountered it was probably when I moved to London. So when I moved to London to train for the 2012 Olympics. So I moved to London in '08 and I was there to 2012. And when I just literally finished my degree, I got a 2-1. And when I was applying for jobs, because I needed to work and train, London's so expensive. So I was applying for jobs and, my CV, I thought it would be, stellar. It's perfect CV. I'm starting out, I've graduated. What's not to love about having someone, employing someone who's just graduated with an economics degree? Yeah. So I would apply for these jobs and it was rejection, one after the other. And then one day, a friend of mine basically said, you know what you need to do, right? You need to have the same CV, but just change your name. Have it look basically less African, less ethnic. That's what I was told. And, I said, okay. So I started applying with the same jobs with a white English name, Sarah Jackson or Danielle Jones, whatever it was. And I would get responses within hours. Oh, come in for an interview, come in for, check, a basic check, all of these different things. And it wasn't until you'd get to the interview and they would be like, they would see your ID and they would understand in that moment that they knew what they were doing when it comes to like racial bias, but they would never admit to it. And it's only when they would see, oh, you're the same. Oh, and there was never an apology. There was never, oh, we didn't realize it was you. And they knew what they were doing, So I think now when it comes to applying for jobs, I think now it's great that, now we have, I think they call it like blind applicants. So you don't look at the name, you just look at the, the CV, you look at what they've done on their resume, which is far more important than someone's name.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I encountered. So yeah, it's tough out there. It really is tough.
That is sad. As a young woman and ambitious, how did that make you feel?
It made me feel hopeless, and it made me feel like I was worthless because, I've spent 3-4 years doing this degree, and in the hope that I would go on to a high flying or the start of my high flying career outside of sport. I would like to think it was a very good balance. Mm. And when I would apply for these jobs, it was like knockback and rejection one after the other. You would start to think, well, you're not good enough. You're not worthy to work for these organizations, for these different corporations. You think that you're not good enough, but it's purely because sometimes it's just racism, sometimes, unfortunately, it is just racism. It's that conscious or unconscious bias that everyone likes to carry and scream about, but they don't realize something as small and minute as rejecting someone's application for a job can be, extremely hurtful. And it was to me at the time, especially as I was young, I was ambitious, I wanted to build a career for myself in London alongside my track career. And, it did hurt me at times, but, eventually I did find employment in that sector. So it worked out okay.
Sometimes I look at that and say, you know what, it was their loss.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Their loss.
Anyway, so when did you first realize that you were born to run, as opposed to any other career? All those people that were sending you rejections and stuff. I mean, you did amazingly well as a runner. When did you realize that this is my thing and not swimming, not, I don't know, being a secretary or whatever it is that is out there?
I think it was, I pretty much know it started when I was young. I used to watch the Olympic Games. So my first one that I ever watched, it was the 92 Olympics in Barcelona. Oh. And the person who stood out the most for me was Linford Christie. So he was British, he was a sprinter, and he was on course to win gold. And I just remember watching it like, wow. I was just like, wow, this is the Olympic Games. Like I remember watching the opening ceremony and watching all these different events and all these different athletes and seeing how incredible it is to watch all of them perform. And then 4 years later, watching the Atlanta Olympics as well. You know, Gail Devers, her battle with, what is her name? Marlene Ottey in the 100-meter final. You know, she won it by a whisker. And then 2000 Olympics, watching my idol when I was growing up, Denise Lewis, win heptathlon gold for Britain as well. So just seeing all these people and just seeing like how incredible it is to be the strongest, the fastest, the most powerful people in sport. And I was like, wow, how can I get in on this? And then I was influenced by all of these people. And then when it came to me personally, my journey into sport came through Sports Day. So I was at Sports Day. We went to the local track. That's where everyone goes within all the schools in Liverpool. And I went to an all-girls school. And in this particular Sports Day, I was competing in the 100 meters, 200 meters, 400 meters, both the 4x1 and 4x4 relays. And I loved it. You know, I really did enjoy my academics, but, you know, I didn't know how I was going to get into sport at such a young age. But that one Sports Day, it was like my moment to shine when all the attention was on me. I remember my mom was in the stands and I would break all the school records and come back to the stands after each event with trophy after medal, after certificate, just one after the other. And, you know, afterwards there was an athletics coach who was a scout. And he asked me, he basically came over and said, you know, you're super talented. You've got incredible speed. You should come down to the track tomorrow, join the club. And I was skeptical at first because I didn't know anyone and I didn't have any friends who was there. But then luckily one of the girls in my class, she said, oh, you know, I'm a member of the club, so I'll come down tomorrow. And I came down the next day and she didn't turn up. But then the coach pretty much showed me the ropes. He introduced me to everyone. And yeah, from then I never looked back.
Oh, wow. It's just amazing. I know. How old were you then?
I was 15.
Oh,
14, 15, about 15, yeah.
It's young. So I wanted to know whether it was a quiet realization. It doesn't sound like it. You were watching Olympics and then you go and run, and it sounds like it was a process. I'm wondering, a young girl sitting at home, how do they figure this out if they were to follow in your footsteps? You know, you could have played tennis. You probably would have been brilliant at it. You could have. So how does a person that's young and 15 figure out that this is my thing if they were to follow the process that you followed?
I think it was, you know, I think it's no different than a young girl watching the Women's World Cup in football. Yeah. And being influenced by, you know, these incredible women who were playing sports. Because that's pretty much how it started for me. If I didn't see the likes of Linford Christie, Marlene Ottey, Denise Lewis when I was growing up, and all the other incredible British athletes on my TV screen, I would never have known how to, you know, become an athlete or how to even take it up in the sport. Yes, in school, we did have athletics in school, but we mainly played hockey, netball. Yeah. We played tennis. Athletics was only part of the summer curriculum, and it was only available for like 5-6 weeks before the end of summer. Whereas we had more access to hockey, which is all year round, netball, you know, women's netball's big, which is all year round. And I think it is a case of, you know, watching the current stars on TV and having access to them on social media and seeing how they conduct themselves, seeing how they perform, seeing just how incredible they are. Because if there's no difference, if boys can be influenced by the likes of Lionel Messi and Wayne Rooney and all these incredible, you know, footballers, you know, LeBron James in basketball, why can't it be the same for young girls being influenced by, you know, the likes of myself, Caster Semenya, you know, in South Africa, Alison Felix in, you know, the US, Shelly Ann Fraser Price in Jamaica. That's how it breeds the next generation, literally by sitting down and watching these sportswomen compete at the highest level.
Absolutely. You know, what is key as you were speaking, and that is important, is the representation.
Mm-hmm.
How we're conducting ourselves, because somebody out there is watching,
yes,
emulating and hoping that it will be them tomorrow. So I think representation is important. And I want to take this moment and just say thank you for representing, because there is a young African, Nigerian, or Tanzanian or South African child that saw you on TV one day, and they are in the making at the moment. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
You know, I climb mountains, as you know, and
yeah.
Guys called Sherpas. They're like a coach. They help you and they guide you. They don't climb for you. They guide you to get to your summit, but you have to climb on your own. You have to do your own thing. And I equate it to even life. We all have Sherpas in our lives. So I want to reflect on you. Who has been your biggest Sherpa on your journey as you went from a young girl to an Olympic gold medalist and more?
Wow, that's a very, very good question. Who's my Sherpa? I think
it doesn't have to be one. There could be
one. I was just about to say, yeah, I think there's like a whole group of people that I'm so thankful for, that have guided me to so much greatness in sport. Like, honestly, I couldn't have done it with so many incredible people. You know, the guy who scouted me on that sports day, he was the one who told me, you know, to come down to the track. And, you know, he actually guided me to my first international call-up when I was 16 years old. So within a year of starting out in the sport, I was now becoming, you know, competing on international level as a child, you know, as a 16, 17-year-old. And it's incredible. So I have him to thank. I have all my other coaches who were able to help me along the journey of, you know, seeing greatness in me that I didn't always see in myself. And, you know, being influenced by my siblings, you know, my brother, Efem, he was massive, you know, just having him there, you know, in the early years of me coming up in the sport, even though he was retiring, he saw, again, a lot of talent in me. I think he saw a lot of himself in me as well. So he would always be there to give me advice. And, of course, my parents. So, you know, through those dark days of, like, there's so much uncertainty, you're measured by performance year after year after year. There's so many expectations that you need to meet, whether it's your own personal goals, whether it's to meet sponsors' demands, endorsement demands, whether it's the federation putting, you know, pressure upon pressure on you. But ultimately, like, my parents would always give me solace and peace and remind myself. They would always remind me why I started and why I should keep going, even through those dark moments. That's when I needed people the most. And I think my parents definitely gave me that peace in those tough moments. So they are probably top of the list when it comes to the Sherpas who I had in my life, and, you know, everyone else who was able to help me along the way.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. It's always good to appreciate and go back. Probably that coach has retired and he probably led other people, but he saw, I especially like what you said, he saw in you what even you hadn't seen in yourself. That is absolutely amazing. So I want to take this moment and thank my sponsors, Vumatel, and this is their message to our listeners and viewers.
Because It's There with Saray Khumalo is proudly sponsored by Vuma.
In a world of possibilities, our choices define who we are. We can choose to simply get things done, but we choose to make a difference. We can choose to go far, or we can choose to go further. We choose great over good every time because we can. And because we can, we must. We don't just act, we activate. When we move forward. Instead of simply providing access, we see the potential for success. Because where others see data, we see dreams. To us, connecting means more than plugs and ports. We exist to empower ordinary people to do extraordinary things. We aim higher and we choose to do more. We don't wait for opportunities. We create them. Our choices define us, and when faced with the choice, we always choose extraordinary.
Contextualizing Anyika's world, you know, as a medal-winning Black athlete, a female Olympian who is retired, which you have, what are some of the issues of representation that you had to navigate through while you were still active on the track?
Well, there was a few things I would say, one of which being, you know, at times you had to encounter racism in the sport. And I think there's this misconception that because, you know, there's a lot of Black athletes in the sport and it's not like a white dominant sport, that, you know, because there's so many of us and we're leading the way and, you know, we're winning medals and, you know, we're performing at the highest level, that you don't encounter racism. But you do. Like, you literally do. You travel from country to country, and sometimes when you're turning up at the airport, you know, customs will ask you, or passport control, sorry, you'll get stopped at passport control and they will ask you, is this your passport? What are you doing here? Who's your port of contact? Like, why are you in our country, basically? Whereas, you know, the interrogation is severe to the point where you just think, I countlessly used to think to myself, is this really worth it? Like, is this worth it? You know, you just want to travel from and compete in this country, and you should be able to do that without any hassle. I don't see you hassling white people, you know, so why is it just Black people who were always having to stop? And it mainly used to happen in parts of Europe for sure, but definitely a lot in Eastern Europe. Yeah. Definitely a lot. And then aside from that, you've got, apart from the racism, to add to that, you've also got to deal with colorism. Mm-hmm. So, you know, people, again, they don't really talk about colorism that much, and they say, oh, it doesn't exist and all of this, that, and the other. I continue to experience colorism till this day, you know, as a dark-skinned Black woman, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. But I definitely feel like people just need to be honest and have conversations about it. I think a lot of society actually just don't realize what colorism is. And that is what I realized after, you know, the unfortunate murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. You know, if you're people just assume, oh, because you're Black, you're just treated the same. And it's like, no, it's not the case. Like, I've been told the reason why, because I always say, like, oh, why don't we see enough Black girls or Black women, Black sportswomen doing campaigns on magazine covers, you know, working with brands, all of these things. I'm just like, why can't I? Because we scream representation all the time, but there's nothing wrong with seeing women who are represented with the same skin tone as you. Like, there's nothing wrong in that. Because behind one Naomi Campbell, there's literally hundreds of thousands of Naomi Campbells, you know? So, and behind the likes of, you know, Anyika Onuora's, there's hundreds of Anyika Onuora's waiting to come through. But, you know, when you're told as a young athlete or as a young woman coming into the sport that Black women just don't sell magazines, or they're just not desirable or attractive enough, or we just can't make money off them, it's super disheartening. It really is. You know, you're constantly told no. And again, it's part of that unfortunate part where you just feel like you're being rejected because society doesn't deem you to be aesthetically beautiful or what they deem to be desirable. Whereas, like, I look at myself in the mirror and I don't care if I don't look great that day. I just always tell myself, like, you've got this, like, you're beautiful, like, look at your skin, look at your body, look at your features, you know. And if you think about it now, all these things that, you know, Black women were told, oh, you know, your nose is too big, or your lips are too big, and, you know, your butt, or all of these things, like, now society is now, people are now paying for these things, you know, unfortunately. So things come back round in literal swings and roundabouts, and it's crazy. It's crazy to think that all of these features that Black women and young Black girls have had, like, literal people from other colors are buying them, lip fillers, nose jobs, you know, implants, BBL, all of these different things, and it's just like, wow. But yeah, anyway, I digress. So yeah, I think those are just some of the things that I've encountered as a Black woman, and also as a Black female athlete. However, what I love now is I love seeing change. And I think, you know, like I said, unfortunately, with the deaths of George Floyd last year, it's been able to wake up a lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of brands, and now having Black women front and center. They're now leading the way, because, I mean, where's culture, fashion, hair, you know, music without Black people, without Black women? You know, you can't not steal from our culture and everything that we've had our whole lives and then just claim it to be your own. Like, no, it doesn't work like that, you know. So yeah, we deserve to be treated equally as well. So I'm glad to see that things are coming back around where we are deserving of those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it that you are acknowledging where it's coming from and that there is change. But how do you feel when you see the minimal change? Because, you know, we can do better. You know, the minimal change in the now era where other Black athletes have had to grapple with the same issues of racism, discrimination, and representation. Yes, it's changing, but it's minimal. How does that make you feel?
Yes, it is minimal. It definitely is minimal. It's not big changes. I definitely feel like, you know, it's not really a complete reflection of certain brands and organizations. Like, for example, when the Black Lives Matter movement was happening last year and they wanted athletes to speak up, I was contacted all the time, like every day. My phone was going off. Different media outlets were like, oh, can you speak on this? Can you, you know, we want your opinion. Have you encountered racism? And I'm like, okay, that's great. But first of all, I am going through along with other Black people, have lived, this is our lived experience. And you can't just like treat this trauma and just kind of make money off it and just trying to have us, because we're the ones who have to deal with this after we've given our interview or after we've written our think piece or whatever. But after that, you just move on to the next story. Whereas this is our daily encounter. You know, it really, really is. So that's why these pledges that these organizations are making, where we want to see, Black people in high power positions. We want to see, you know, say, I don't know, I think in certain organizations, they have like 30-40% representation of people of color in the boardroom, CEO, you know, director. All of these different positions are now being given to us. Yes, it definitely is minimal, but ultimately we just have to find a way to move forward and keep applying pressure. So don't allow all of this to be performative just because, one, you want to donate to Black Lives Matter because it's touching on your white guilt. And two, in the UK, we have Black History Month. So you've got all these organizations who want to highlight the things to do with like Black culture, Black British culture, how Black people have contributed to society since, you know, the beginning of time. And it's celebrated, but why is it only celebrated once a month? Why is it not consistent? You know, there's a lot of Black people, Black African people especially, you know, a lot of Asian people who are the literal backbone of the NHS, which is the National Health Service in the UK. We get free healthcare, and they have been standing front and center, literally building the NHS from when they arrive in this country. So people are always quick to say, oh, get the immigrants out of our country. But they're the ones who are also helping to save your life, you know, which is ironic because, you know, you've got a lot of racist people who are like, no, I don't like people of color or black people. But then when you get admitted to hospital, you're being looked after by a Ghanaian doctor, a Nigerian nurse, a South African surgeon, there's so many Asian GPs as well. So it's crazy, but I just want to see change. And although it's minimal, we do have to start somewhere.
Absolutely. I think the key for me is something that you picked up on. We still need to keep the pressure because it's not nearly enough, but it's going in the right direction, which should be celebrated. So you are a podcaster as well. I looked up your podcast, the podcast Hidden Greatness. Absolutely love the name, by the way, about hidden power of the subconscious mind as it applies to talented people. How did you come up with that? And how do you find podcasting as a game and a way of conveying ideas?
Well, with the podcast name, Hidden Greatness, so it was between me, the name came between me and the other co-founder, Michael, and he's incredible. He does all the production side, and he's just a really, really super talented guy, and he's a huge track and field fan, and he follows and works with different sports as well. So we kind of came up with the name Hidden Greatness because all of us as world-class athletes, we kind of tap into something that takes us to the next level despite our obstacles. So the different guests that I've had on encountered injury, encountered alcoholism, depression, bereavement, loss of, earnings, bankruptcy, all of these different things. But somehow they always found a way to keep going. So we asked the question, what was it? What was your hidden greatness in that moment? Because, you were going through XYZ, you were going through depression and illness and just those dark moments. But what was it that led you to win an Olympic gold, a year later, or becoming world championship bronze medalist? 2 years later, when everybody has told you, no, you can't do this, you're never going to make a comeback, you should just retire. So I think these are questions that are basically need to be asked. And it's great that I've had some incredible guests from the world of sport who've been able to just say, how honest and refreshing it is to answer these conversations, because no one really asks these questions. When you listen to sports podcasts, one of the reasons why I started my own podcast is because I listen to a lot of pop culture podcasts, a lot of Black podcasters. I listen to political ones. I have a wide range of podcasts that I listen to. But when it comes to my own sport, none of them are led by, when it comes to sports and my own sports, none of them are led by women, hardly any of them. None of them are led by athletes themselves. And none of them are led by Black women. So I'm like, what is going on? So I would just sit there and be like, okay, if I had my own podcast, what would the format be? What would it be called? And, how would it be structured? And, all we do is we literally go through the life and career of each individual person. And, we pick out key moments in their career where, they've been vocal about this, they've spoken about, this hard time in that moment. We just have an open and honest conversation. And what separates me, I think, from other presenters or people who have podcasts is because I'm also a former athlete who went through the same thing. Yes. So it's relatable. Everything that they've gone through, I can relate to in those moments. So you're literally not speaking to someone who doesn't know what it's like to encounter XYZ. Like, I've encountered that and more. So I think that's why a lot of the guests that we have on the show are able to be super comfortable when I'm asking the questions, and that helps the listener as well to hopefully identify with all the guests that we have on. And you also don't need to be an athlete to understand each individual story as well, which is just as good.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are an ambassador for Malaria No More UK and a survivor of the illness yourself. You know, why is malaria so important to you? And, you know, I'm asking that because there are many other illnesses on the continent that you could have been an advocate for, but you chose malaria. Why is it important to you?
I think supporting and being an ambassador for Malaria No More was just an incredible opportunity to basically highlight the, the illnesses that can occur within anyone who gets, bit by a mosquito and who contracts the disease. I would always go back to Nigeria and I would always take my, anti-malarial tablets, and I never ever encountered malaria. And then this one time I got malaria, it literally just, it changed so much in my life. I almost lost my life. I was so close to literally dying. So, yeah, it just having that and realizing how close I was, it made me extremely fortunate. Fortunate to be alive, fortunate that I was able to recover and receive treatment in the UK. Whereas, in parts of Africa, people contact malaria and they die and they don't have the same medical attention as you would in the UK. So it makes me super fortunate to have survived this awful disease. And then once I told my story about when I contracted malaria and how, I won an Olympic medal 10 months later, I think no one believed me. Even when I didn't tell anyone. I only told like a few people because I just wanted to focus on getting to Rio, the Olympics. And then once I told my story the following year, people were ringing me and messaging me and they were saying, there's no way you went through that. There's no way. But, I did. I really, really did encounter it. I've just never been one of those people who's like, if I've been injured or ill or whatever, I don't need sympathy. Just tell me how I'm going to recover. Tell me how I'm going to, how long have I got for this rehab program? All of these things. That's always how it was for me. So when I did make a full recovery and told my story to the world, a lot of people were shocked because they just didn't believe that it did happen. And then from then, I got, the incredible opportunity to become an ambassador for Malaria No More and just share my story. I'm just, outside of being a world-class athlete, I was just a regular person, So if it can happen to me, being a high-profile athlete, where, you're so dependent on your immune system to function each and every day, then imagine what happens to the average person in Africa who also contracts malaria. So, I'm happy to tell my story and advocate for being an ambassador for Malaria No More, and also just tell how, ways in which we can help to eradicate it sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. I think I'm also an ambassador, and it's for exactly the same reason. It's realizing that we can eradicate malaria in our lifetime. And malaria kills a child every 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it exciting if we can do one small thing, to make sure that it doesn't happen to another child? So again, thank you for your service. You're really representing Nigeria and the continent on the global stage. And I'm so proud and privileged to have you on the podcast. Having said that, COVID-19 is wreaking havoc since the late 2019. Mm-hmm. What have been some of your musings about wellness and survival in the recent times? What are you doing to just keep yourself upbeat and going?
Oh, good question. You know what, right? I think, first of all, I always say this to people because people always ask me, do you miss competing? Do you miss track and field? Do you miss training? And I'm always like, no. The reason being is because I thank God I retired at the perfect time, because if I was trying to go for one more year in Tokyo, I wouldn't have made it, because, by the time it got to 2019, mid 2019, my mind was already elsewhere. I didn't want to focus on sport anymore. I wanted to focus on my future outside of sport. So I had a lot of sit down conversations with myself. I would ask myself, what do I really want? You know, the goals and aspirations I thought I wanted once I retired, some of them are there and some of them aren't. And a lot of it is contributed due to the shift of COVID-19, lockdown, being in quarantine, isolation, all of these new things that are now added to the English dictionary. You know, it's just incredible how fortunate we are to even see 2021 after, you know, the fact that so many people have lost their lives to this, you know, deadly virus. So it made me question a lot of things. And one of the things that I used to do is I never really used to take care of myself. And I don't mean that in the sense of like, you know, wellness, like in health, like eating and nutrition and stuff. I'm talking in the sense of like the thoughts that I would have on a daily basis. So your structure changes once you retire. So a lot of retired athletes would always tell me it takes you at least 2 years to find structure from being in professional sport. Well, I was in professional sport for almost 20 years. So it takes a lot of time to get out of your normal routine. And I knew I wanted to shift it. I didn't miss it. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to be one of those athletes to go back. But one of the things that I never used to do, I realized, was I never used to take care of my mind in the sense that it would always be active. You know, I'm always looking for the next thing. You have people telling you, you're not good enough to do this or not good enough to do that. And then you, even though you've got the, you know, a huge collection of medals, you still tend to suffer from imposter syndrome. So I would tell myself, no, we're not doing that anymore. We are literally one of the best athletes in the world. Like the average person couldn't do what I've done in their lifetime. So how is anyone going to tell you, oh, you know, you did okay for your career? Like, no, I gave up a lot. I did a lot. I saved my country. You know, those are just some of the things that, you know, I realized I need to shift in my mind. And then the other thing is what I did, and I still do to this day, which is tremendous. I tell people no. You know, my whole life, I've always had to be yes. Oh yeah, don't worry about that. No, yeah, I'm fine. I'll do this. I'll do that. You know, when you're a professional sports person, you become independent from such a young age very quickly. Whereas now, I can learn to say. I was always saying yes before. Whereas now, if something doesn't align with me, I always say no. I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. No, I'm okay. And, you know, you get requests or you get people asking you, you know, can you do this? And they say, oh, we haven't got a budget, even though and I'm like, well, how am I supposed to? I got bills to pay. I got to pay. Like, I'm no longer a retired athlete. Like, you want me to come and speak on your platform or speak on this panel or do this or, you know, represent this, and you're being paid, but you don't want to pay me. I'm like, I'm okay. I'm okay with like saying no and turning the opportunity down for two reasons. One, I always believe that things will come back in tenfold. And two, like, it's okay to just say no after saying yes constantly for your whole life. Like, and I always feel a sense of peace once I have said no. I say no and I'm like, oh, that felt good. You know? So in terms of my health and wellness, going back to your original question, in terms of finding myself, I those are just some of the things that I would do. I would find calm and peaceful moments in literally just saying no and just being content with the things that I have, but know that there's so much greater to come.
Yeah, absolutely. That is beautiful. There is power in saying no.
That's it. It's powerful.
Yeah. So my last question, can you describe your best failure and how it propelled you forward?
My best failure? Oh, I would probably say, I think my best failure, this is funny, but my best failure, I would definitely say, was when I won my Olympic medal at the Rio Olympic Games. I think it was my best failure because, you know, 10 months prior, I was, you know, in a hospital bed wondering how on earth I'm even going to, you know, make it to the start line or get back training or get back to even a normal routine as a professional sportswoman. Because the doctors basically said to me, no, you're not going to make a full recovery. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. Whereas I every time I used to hear, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, I would always find a way to say yes. Yeah. So that was the first battle. And then the second battle, once I had made a full recovery, was, I think, I'm going to try and give you the shortened version. But in Olympic year, we have the Olympic trials. And even though I was one of the favourites to win, so in our selection policy, you have first two past the post, and the third spot is discretion. So I was supposed to win it, or at least finish top two. That was the plan. It was the easiest race I probably would have had to do all year, but I choked. I didn't have a good race, and I finished third. And me finishing third, it put me in a very, very tough position, because then 2 weeks later I had to go to the European Championships and basically do a race off. And I say that in inverted commas because that's effectively what it was. It was a race off between myself and my teammate, Christina Hurigu. So we were fighting for that last spot for the women's 400 meters to compete in Rio. And even though I beat Christine in that race, which is probably one of the best races I've ever done, because, you know, there was so much pressure, so much stress, so much anxiety, like everything was on the line because of this race. And I had to beat the one person who, you know, is the, you know, current Olympic silver medalist, you know, countless world championship medals. You know, she's one of the best in the world, and she's also my friend. That's what made it worse. So, you know, I was up against so much. But when I beat Christine, it made me realize, like, you can overcome anything. You know, you can do this despite the odds, despite people telling you no, despite this, all of that. Like, you did it. You did what you had to do. Now, I say it's my biggest failure because I unfortunately unfortunately for me, but fortunately for Christine, they ended up giving her the final spot for the women's 400 in Rio. However, I then, even though I was disappointed to not get the spot, even though that felt like a failure to not get that individual, I still went to Tokyo and I still went and got a medal. And that was my third Olympic Games. So thank you. So even though it felt like a complete failure, I literally went from feeling like a failure 5 weeks prior to then a month later, I've got the one medal that every single athlete in the world wants and craves and works so hard for. So I would probably say that was that was a moment for me when it felt like my biggest failure. But, you know, there's a story behind it, and it reminded me to just never give up on myself despite my circumstances.
Absolutely. Wow, this was an amazing. I really feel privileged and honored to have had an hour of your time and to listening to your story and how you continue to inspire young Black and white children on the continent to believe in themselves, to never give up, to know that, you know, we are all amazing as human beings. So thank you. And I hope that God blesses you and you come back again one day and visit us and tell us about amazing stuff that you're doing as a retired athlete.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to speak with you today, and I definitely look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.